Probably first order of business. There's a poll that I would like you to focus on, and the poll is focused on how you are considering deploying flash systems, if at all. And it may range from if we look up here, virtual end user computing, VDI, very popular one, certainly. A critical application where there is a business advantage in just running it faster. Things that don't behave well, perhaps with your existing storage investments. Moving down to general purpose storage, and maybe a little statement on the flash industry for us. Two waves kind of that we saw. It was about performance in the early days. I'm thinking of like TMS in 2004 and Violin as they went, where the value add was on very much on hardware. And that was great for certain use cases. The fine products that are represented here by the panel are more than that. It's not just about pure performance. It's about services, features that we need as enterprise organizations to make it work for us. So I'm very interested to see where this goes, and I'm kind of don't want to get too focused at the poll as it cranks along. But so keep focused on that as we go through the session. And probably the best place to start, I'd like the panelists to get a chance to introduce themselves and give a little bit of information about the products they're representing and some strategic things for you to take away.
So, hello, my name is Chad Sakach. I head up the SEs at EMC. Thank you for your time and your effort today. It was a pretty cool day, I have to say. For us, Flash is disrupting everything that we do. It's a case where tier 1 workloads are being cannibalized from VMAX to things like Extreme I/O. It's things like Scale I/O software stacks being deployed on SSDs and commodity scale-out servers. And it's also radical new ways to use Flash as extensions of memory, natively accessed via things like HDFS, things like DSSD. I think we're going to see it everywhere. And frankly, there's hundreds of thousands of customers out there with VNXs and VMAX that want to use a lot of Flash in those arrays to extend their lives and their behaviors. But it really is a big disruption across everything in the portfolio. And one last thing I'd say is keep your eyes peeled, your ears to the ground. I think you're even going to see Flash in strange orthogonal use cases in the future, stuff that wasn't on the list. Things like write once, read many, long, cold, deep archives. It's normally associated with performance for now, but that's not permanent. So, hello.
Very cool. Justin?
Yeah, sure. Justin Lauer. I'm the principal technology evangelist over at Tintri. We are pretty much laser focused on the fastest growing part of your data centers, virtualized applications. We definitely have an interesting Flash story, but Flash just being the basis for an entire company, we didn't think was good enough. So there's a massive amount of storage intelligence we've built on top of a great Flash story that all operates at the VM and vDisk level. We're basically storage specifically for the hypervisor market.
So thank you for joining us. I know it's been a long day. Hope that you're going to have a lot of information shared here. If not, find it very entertaining. So my name is Vaughn Stewart. I'm the Chief Technical Evangelist at Pure Storage. We offer an all-flash-based storage array with a very unique caveat, which is we offer it for the price of a mid-priced disk-based array. And when you think about that from a construct, it means we get to take your classic low-end SAN, high-end SAN, and now your Uber all-flash-based SAN, and provide you that high-end performance at the low-end price point. So there's this massive change in terms of economics that are almost as interesting as the technology itself. Flash allows you as a customer to solve today's problems from a tactical perspective, something that requires greater performance, isn't servicing your end users or customers to the level that they are seeking, but actually opens up a much broader, longer-term strategy due to its performance characteristics as well as the size of its footprint, which is very small, and the reduction in terms of power and cooling requirements. So what you receive at the end of the day, and our vision from Flash, is we will be the vendor that will take you forward into an all-flash-based data center, and we will allow you both, whether it's operationally with your people or from a data center physical building construct, allow you to scale the amount of data that you can address and store today and going forward.
Cool. Adam?
Thanks. I'm Adam Carter. I'm the Director of Product Management at SolidFire. And to give you a little background about that, so SolidFire, there's a bunch of similarity here. It's an all-flash array. It's a scale-out design, and we set out to build something that was very unique to solving service provider problems in large-scale environments, multi-tenant environments. It was really this mission to go build something that changed the way multi-tenant clouds were built in a way that traditional storage just wasn't solving well and was failing to really execute well on. And in the end, Flash became an important part of that strategy and an important tool, but not really the thing that it's all about. What's interesting is the company has continued to grow and see a lot of success in service providers, is how much what service providers were trying to solve over the last few years applies to pretty much anybody who's trying to build their next generation data center and solve a lot of the same issues of large scale deployments and large scale automation. I mean, people call this anything from, some people call it private cloud or software defined data center, all kinds of names around it. Doesn't really matter either way. It's their new deployment where they're going to go build something that's a very different model. And that applies similar techniques that SolidFire is built around. So a lot of that has to do with how much we're into our automation and our APIs and being performant and efficient at the same time and building a true large-scale system that can deliver the best of both worlds around performance and cost metrics that customers can really build an economical environment at large scale to solve these problems.
Very cool. Now, as we get into, again, we're all trying to solve problems here, right? And wanted to focus mostly on use cases to start with. On the quick poll update, again, much to my surprise, I figured VDI would definitely got its play, but critical applications where there's a business advantage in improving performance is dwarfing pretty much everything else. Not quite as much, but some folks looking at general purpose as well, which is an interesting bit too. Now, a little background about startups in the Midwest. I've been a part of 2 startups, well, 3 if you include Ahead, 6 years ago. We're very conservative. We adopt things after it gets vetted out, after it's proven. Let the West Coast grab a few, maybe an R&D lab in the financial district on Wall Street, right? And let them vet some things out. And then 3 years later, the Midwest does it. I've been pleasantly surprised in our customer base to find something like the Cache database on Epic in healthcare. That's a big deal, running on a new all-flash system, an Oracle database where taking performance, something that took 8 hours, a critical process, category number 2, down to 30 minutes. Things that the Midwest normally wouldn't jump into quite so early in the cycle. So just to get a feel for use cases as we go and what you're seeing in your respective customer bases here, I'm pleasantly surprised and curious to see what you think.
It's fascinating. I mean, again, just quick show of hands. How many customers here are using a VMAX? So to everybody, and again, historically, high-end arrays were deployed for thing in bucket number 2 for reasons that are very historical. The reality is that architectures that have been built over the last 10, 20 years to support mission-critical workloads were designed around reliability, availability, serviceability, those sorts of things. But they also had this cachet of being high performance. The reality is those architectures have not been the highest performance platforms for the last 5, 6 years. Just, newsflash, right? The reality is very, very blunt and very simple. If you have workloads that are critical applications where there's a business advantage in improving performance, those sets of workloads should actively be moving towards all-flash designs, right? And one thing I'd encourage our customers and even our non-customers, regardless of who they're evaluating and picking, you should look at the choices that you have in the marketplace for those things. Now, this is one thing that is interesting and a little controversial, right? The question is, what's the place for those older architectures in this all-flash era? I have a customer that I would wager almost everybody here in the room uses, and they are the single largest Oracle rack set of clusters in the world, and they want an all-flash array. But they have a dependency on something obscure called T10 diff, which is like an end-to-end check of consistency through the file system, HBA, all the way to the storage subsystem. They have a requirement where they have 3,000 consistency groups that need to be replicated asynchronously with a 3-second RPO. There are currently, now this is only a matter of time, currently no all-flash arrays from anybody, certainly not ours, I don't think anybody in the industry, that would be able to cover that use case. There's a universe of those right, that belong on things like VMAX's, HDS, and others, just filled to the gills with flash. But I have to say that's relatively rare compared to the 40 people that are here. There's maybe one, out of this 40 that, would have fit in that category. The rest of you really should be looking at it and going and saying, how would I leverage all flash technologies, not just for their performance characteristics, but for their economic characteristics, for their space power cooling characteristics, for their simplicity of operation characteristics. And intrinsically what occurs is that what starts off in kind of this universe like this expands out. Eventually we will have all flash arrays that support T10 diff and that sort of SRDF style replication behaviors. And then the other thing is that over the next 2 years, I've made wild predictions that have been wrong. I'm going to keep making them. We can expect to see NAND and NAND successors like phase change and carbon nanotube drive down the cost per gig along with dedupe, compression, and other things that basically make this range of economic use cases broaden out.
So I echo a fair amount of Chad's sentiments, but I think that based on the product portfolios of our company, we have a bit of a different perspective on the market. If you look at the slide here, I think a lot of the sentiment in terms of where would you consider deploying flash today is based on where's my pain point. So VDI pains are rampant throughout the industry, and obviously my most critical applications, right? There's usually some line of business item tied to these critical applications. That's why they're classified this way. If in your mind you can wrap your head around the construct of, I can have flash today for the price of disk, I am now looking at applying it universally, which is it may be around solving a scaling end-user computing customer satisfaction issue within these applications. It may be a means to drive my business faster by being able to have a better responsive interface to whatever the apps are. Or it may just mean I can save my team a lot of money, power, cooling, and space because I'm not paying a price premium. I think when you lose the price premium element, right, and that's sometimes hard to let go. So I will have conversations with customers, and when you talk to the storage team, someone will say, I don't need that performance in my application. It runs at X number of IOs, and that's good enough.
I don't think that's just a pure viewpoint. I think Justin and I would agree, and I bet you Adam would too.
Yeah. So when you come back to this and you say, but you're the storage person saying, I have a budget for IOP. There's an application on there. Have you gone to the application team? And so, case in point, okay? What are we seeing happen in the market? We're seeing customers take processes that run, for example, 43 minutes, 9 hours on a batch run turn into 43 minutes. They have to do a lot of iterations of it. And so you take a workflow, a financial workflow that closes in days into a single day, and you say, that's tactical. That's like your chart. This is where I would engage into the all-flash space.
To Chad's point, I don't think any of us would disagree that flash makes things faster.
No, that's not what it's
But flash is not a magic band-aid
that's
for the
not
data
where I'm
set.
going in this. Hold it.
And I definitely want to get your perspective on use cases.
We're talking
too,
about
so we'll
entry
jump in.
point, right? So this is your entry point. It's a performance challenge. That same customer went from 8 floor tiles of storage to 8 rack units. 156,000 BTU of heat generated per hour to 5,000. Went from running on 220 lines because they're in the States to 110 power, right? So now what's my metric? Is it data center resource reduction? Is it performance to the line of business? Or is it when you look at their data analysts who went from running 6 concurrent queries to now running 300? They're driving more information to the business, making smarter and faster decisions in a faster or shorter amount of time. So it's this interesting transformative form of technology, which is, yes, hardware-wise, we all have the same hardware. What does it mean to your business? And I would advocate, whether you're looking at any of our products, you can have this transformative experience.
That's probably a good transition.
I'm shaking my head yes through everything Vaughn's saying, except for the fact that this is you can universally apply that across any vendor as applying flash in an enterprise stable manner. My point was flash alone isn't this magic Band-Aid you just slap on your data center door
you can't
and
buy
it fixes all problems.
buy an all-flash VMAX for the price of our.
But hang on, let's
right?
let him finish. You got a fair amount of time there, Vaughn. Let Justin go.
And obviously, price comes in to a lot of things. I'm glad I'm sitting between these two, by the way.
Oh no! Oh no!
All right, more tequila. All
Ladies
right.
and gentlemen, Matt Murray in the front row. Here we go.
I think all of us are trying to, in our own way, incorporate intelligence on top of a fantastic flash base, right? Adam and I have a lot of agreements on quality of service and things like that. Obviously, dollar per gig and dedupe is Pure's, game. I've just seen over and over in our customer base with what applications. Ironically, those first two things are pretty much the use cases we're seeing. What I'm seeing is the intelligence we're adding on top of Flash is nailing those things. And I'm the only one, with the exception of some of Chad's portfolio that's up here, that doesn't have, by the technical definition, an all-flash array. What our intelligence allows us to deliver is the look and feel of all-flash. And you're the one who brought up price, so I'll bring it up, at a far more economical model than even an all-flash array with great dedupe.
Yeah, so the thing I would want to add on to that, because I think you're back on the right track, so I appreciate that, because that was part of the question, was down to this use case thing, right? The part about Flash that's interesting to me, it is Flash can cure a lot of things, but it's not like this panacea at the end of it. Like it made everything brilliant, right? There's a number of Flash vendors who aren't on this stage who've died on the hill of like, oh, I'm brilliantly fast and I'll solve all your problems and nobody cares now, right?
Yeah.
The thing that's interesting to me when I look at the use cases here too is, all of us. At the end, the apps are king here, right? Like, heck with the technology part underneath the covers. A lot of the applications are really the things you should be caring about. And some of us are different and better or worse at different applications. So to that end, I kind of want to just get to the use case part that's the most interesting to me. Because when I look at this list, I'll tell you a bit about, so where SolidFire is coming from is we were designed for a specific use case. So we end up saying, hey, we're really good at this use case and we might not be best at others. And when I look at this list, one of the big differences here that I don't know if I'd paint everybody the same way, but we kind of don't go after, I'm glad to see that niche is a low thing in this, because that's where I think a lot of things have gone wrong with the impression of Flash, is niche apps. I'm glad to see a lot of more critical application stuff, some general purpose storage, where we find ourselves being applied, honestly, because we were built for this kind of service provider use cases. Generally, somebody has some really good large-scale infrastructure reason why they go deploy us. It has nothing to do with Flash. It's, I need to deploy OpenStack to solve this development issue and this issue I have with too much in Amazon, in Rackspace, and in other places. I'm going to go solve that problem, and what's the best gear for that piece of my infrastructure? And they end up going after that, and then you see the other use cases bleed in. Just because they happen to fit inside the same system, it becomes convenient to maybe layer on, oh, there's a few problematic apps down here that I used to think I'd put just one dedicated flashing behind. Nope, don't need to do that. I can pile it on. Because you can pile on a lot to any of these all-flash systems. You can pile on a lot, but that doesn't become the impetus generally for you actually wanting to deploy something and change your infrastructure so drastically to go to an all-flash array.
I think that, look, there is one place where I think there can be no disagreement because it's math. Right. When we meet aliens, they'll speak to us in math because it's universal, right? NAND flash has got a materially different latency behavior on write and read and power and cooling and those things, which means that storage stacks that have frustrated people for a long time because of lots of various things that have existed for a long time can be either re-architected in some cases or can be radically ground up, be recreated that enable certain things that I think would have been very difficult prior to this germ technology that we can all leverage, right? I will say that one place where, Justin, you had mentioned it, right? The EMC view on this one is really simple, which is that we think that all flash arrays will over time cannibalize the domain of a certain band of the market, which is actually a big swath of the band, right? I can tell you that, man, oh man, I've got customers that are deploying giant Hadoop clusters for capacity use cases that maybe one day when 3D NAND from Samsung hits, 16 terabytes for a given dollar cost, maybe that will also be a flash use case. But today, when you use iTunes, when you use Facebook, when you use these things, today, they still use magnetic media over here, and they still use a whack load of flash for other workloads. Our view is not that it's a binary, all in, all one way or the other way. What we do feel very strongly, though, is that The world of the all-flash arrays and Extreme I/O, in our opinion, of course, I've drunk the Kool-Aid along with the tequila. We think it's the best all-flash array in the market when you're targeting the behaviors of an all-flash array. But to us, it's not binary. It's not a cure-all. It doesn't cure cancer.
So data lifecycle, real quick. Yeah, and this is an important concept because at the current cost feeling, how far do you think it goes? Because you mentioned a number of use cases where data is far, in terms of capacity, far outnumbering what you might have in the transactional world that you referred to earlier. How far are we going?
So we're starting at $3 a usable gig today.
So do you realize
that's a price point in line with disk.
You realize that the use cases I'm describing are at 10 cents a gig. Just
yeah, but hold on, so there's a subtle shift here. I'm talking about what's available to customers to solve their problem today, not about what's going to solve their problem in 5 years.
No. I'm literally saying.
You're saying Extreme I/O is 10 cents a gig?
No. What I said is those use cases, which are critical to everybody's.
Magnetic media-based,
yeah. What's that?
The magnetic media-based use cases.
I'm just saying, like literally, when you are looking at not a high-performance NoSQL or SQL database that is supporting something, but literally a MapReduce workload that's a data tub, they are already at 10 cents a gig pre-dedupe compression, which can be applied in some forms to magnetic media.
So can I make a blind attempt at maybe some peace to see if so I want to see if, I'll tell you my view for a second. I want to see if it actually helps a bit, because I think it's a bit on the same page with both of you to an extent, right? So I think if we wanted to draw this big pyramid of like all the different storage use cases we've got out there, right? The thing that we're challenged with is, I hope we can agree on, there's not one solution that can do everything. Like everything perfectly, it's the best at every piece of the end, all the way down to the I'm going to archive your stuff like S3 Glacier does, right? We're cool? So
does everyone agree?
It's the premise we were founded on, so I.
So the thing I'm interested in is
I didn't hear you agree, Vaughn.
Let him finish his point. I don't know where he's going.
So where I'm going is I think people
agreement
had this
right
perception, and some people still do. It kind of depends on where you are on the train of thought of where this stuff's going. But I viewed, Flash in the early days, it started just at the very tip, this insane, nobody cared what it cost because the app was so egregious they would pay anything to put it in there. And that's where the first all-flash arrays came out of. And what's going on, a disk owns, huge chunk here, and there's high performance disk and low performance disk and tape and whatever in the heck is behind Glacier. Wade, I don't even know magic, right? So I look at that tier and what's going on with a lot of the all flash arrays, you guys, we're in that boat too, pushing down. We're going, look, we can push this way down. Now, we don't eliminate any layer. In my opinion, no layer just goes poof and disappears, but we're pushing really hard down on those layers, and we could argue how hard we're pushing or how far, $3, $1, whatever. We're all pushing really hard on that, and I think the perception is, how far do you think we're pushing, right? And I actually think, depending on who you polled here, especially if you corner one of us individually, we could probably surprise you at how far we're trying to push that down and how far we think it's going to go soon.
I got to be honest with you, literally.
Is that piece reasonable?
No, totally. And by the way, hitting the bands that traditional high-performance SANs served with disk, to me, is not the state of the art of this. It's a huge swath of the market where customers can be served better with new architectural models. Agreed. Literally, how far we're trying to push it is, believe it or not, in R&D labs, it is possible. Again, this is future. I'm not saying now. Here I'm saying currently those big, giant Hadoop and object stores at ultra-high scale that are all still magnetic media, there's a ton of work going on to go, how do we hit a cent per gig using NAND, phase change, carbon nanotube, because that would actually allow you to actually be like Glacier in terms of price point, but not have the very weird, it takes you a week before you can access your content.
So I agree with you guys in the premise, which is, and you summarize it very well, which is there's an entry point, right? The pioneers in this space, TMS, Violin Memory, Fusion I/O, usually aren't looked at in today's market as saying they've got something very interesting and groundbreaking. They're there, they're viable, you can purchase them. Right, but the market and the requirements have moved. They came to market saying, I have the fastest form of storage, I'm going to reclassify as tier 0, and you're going to pay for it. What we're saying is there are technology enablements that take the hardware and it'll allow you to do more with it so that you can start to adopt today and rethink your structure. So today, tier 1 with all flash, if that's where you want to go because you understand the benefits, whether it's performance-based or operational or environmental, great. Tier 2, I assure you, someone will be selling tier 2 all flash devices next year.
So listen,
Guarantee
guys,
you.
I got to tell you, like, one of the things that scares, again, I'm very lucky to not be a sales rep and not to have to be an SE, to be a, salespeople have to carry a quota, right? One of the things that's terrifying for EMC sales reps, any EMC sales reps in the room? I hope not.
Probably so.
Yeah. It is possible using Scale.io, which is a software-only thing, right? Which is currently 50 cents a gig at its list price, right?
This includes capacity?
Then what you do is you attach it to commodity off-the-shelf servers loaded to the gills with SSDs, and you can get into a price point which terrifies, people. But all of these technologies, basically, all that it is it's back to Adam's point. Technologies, vendors, innovation occurs which continually expands the envelope of what can be done. And it is possible. We have customers that are deploying those things for less than $1 a gig on CMLC. Now, it's being used for these weirdo use cases today, but that's the state of the possible, just expanding out and changing.
So I think you make a good point, which kind of ties back into what Justin and Adam had brought up earlier, which is you can build whatever you'd like to build, and you can throw low-cost components at it. Your ecosystem requires you to have certification with your technology partners, integration points, right? The customers need the confidence. We're in the Midwest, right? Like, prove it to me, like, show me, right? They need that validation before going forward. And so it's fascinating when we'll talk about something like Scale.io, but I don't believe Scale.io is on the path of certification to replace VMAX sales anytime
It actually
soon.
got certified on the HCL actually yesterday for VMware. And by the way, we're also on the Epic support certification matrix as well. It's just, I just think, like, look, what ends up happening, what's weird today, right? Both from the extreme ends on object and blah, 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 and, the esoteric tier 0 just broadens out. I think the main takeaway is, frankly, if you're in a cave somewhere going, I'm not sure if I should leverage this stuff, then maybe you've missed the boat.
Real quick setup for where I think you're
I've
going.
been pontificating the whole conversation here, just listening to the dollar per gig story be rehashed over and over again, thinking, if I'm a customer and all I'm being sold is a promise of dollar per gig or efficiency in flash, I need to ask the question to that vendor, what are you doing besides giving me efficient flash? What other intellectual property are you going to provide me? What other value am I going to get other than really cheap, fast disk? And I think that's an important thing for every customer to start asking their vendors. What other value other than cheap, fast flash do you give me? Because the reality is all of us dedupe. The differences are so minute that I would argue with Vaughn for the whole rest of the day about that. And the reality is we're all going to ride Moore's Law together. It's not like one of us has, some secret set of technology that eventually wouldn't be available to everyone else in the industry.
So you make a really good question, right? So there's times where, and Chad has fostered some of this conversation of late, like the 5 storage architectures that you can purchase today. There's scale up, there's tight scale out, there's loose scale out.
So you read my blog, dude.
And I look at this as it's the wrong question. Is it informative? Absolutely. It's the wrong question. What's the customer seeking? And this goes to your point. What's your customer seeking? If I can take a 10-fold gain in performance at a 0 gain in cost, customers want that. Customers want non-disruptive means of growing their data set, whether it's performance or capacity, right? That's why you have 5 different types of architectures over time, because each one was a stab at trying to solve it, right? We have fundamentally a different architecture in all flash arrays. We have probably the closest forms of data reduction technologies because we leverage combinations of them, right?
Get compared all the time for that.
Right.
But our architectures
Our architectures are different.
Very different.
But can I scale both performance and capacity completely non-disruptive in both platforms? Yeah. Can I do that with my existing
That's
disk arrays?
baloney,
I
Vaughn.
can't.
That is.
I thought
that
the
is-
same
that is-
thing. I'm
that's
glad you
baloney.
said
To a
it.
point, you can.
Hold on.
Okay.
Stop. Don't tell me you have a scale-out array that can't move beyond its original config, because that's what you have.
No, dude. I
But-
didn't say what I was going to say. I just said what
wanna
you said
scale-
was
If you
was
wanna-
cuckoo.
If you want to scale performance and capacity,
Can I pour another drink?
650.
Yeah.
You sure can.
By the way, there is no architecture in the world. It doesn't matter whether you're type 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. And by the way, I only wrote that not out of I want to evangelize something. It was a nerdy thought that was in my brain I had to get out.
Get back to the point about scaling.
There is no storage architecture that can scale performance and capacity in no way, disrupting workloads with data services that magically work across the whole thing from infinitely, which I think was a part of what you said.
No, you added infinitely. I just said the customer wants to scale non-disruptively.
Yeah.
They want a service provider experience.
So let me ask a very basic question then, dude. Okay. So let's just say a customer says, I want to be able to take a snapshot of a device on a pure array, and it exceeds the capacity. And I don't mean capacity in terms of gigabytes of storage, but literally IOPS envelope, capacity envelope, whatever, and I want to mount that up and run something against it. Eventually, you run into a system limit. And I'm not saying Extreme I/O does that and solves world hunger. I think that particular use case, yeah, I think it does it better. But you know what? It doesn't, any one of those saying that, okay, this somehow does it for everything.
Pause. We got smart customers in the room. Let's just pause, because you dropped two products. If I had a system and I'm running a data set and I'm at somewhere near the system limit of performance or capacity,
Yep.
I can add new SSDs on completely non-disruptively.
Yep.
I can go from 300 series to all the products in the 400 series line and future non-disruptively to gain the performance that I'm going to need to run that data set. If I had an Extreme I/O box, I'd have to wipe all that data, rebuild that Extreme I/O cluster.
Guys, real quick. We're losing the direction here. One moment.
I think
Guys, let's.
What's the goal? Every system has.
Guys, one moment. I don't want to dig too much into the gunk of the product, and I appreciate that. It's good gunk. It's good gunk. Believe me.
Scott, can I try to derail that a little bit by saying this is one comment I'd like to make for all four of our sake, because we are getting into the weeds a bit of. I'm assuming nobody's going to give us a PO at the end of this, right? Nobody? Actually, raise your hand if you have a PO. So without that, one of the things I comment on this is my observation being at an all-flash array vendor and wanting to evangelize to you for a minute of listen to the conversation going on amongst the all-flash array vendors up against each other today and compare that to what was going on 3 years ago, right? Like, my SLC blah NAND 19 nanometer blah. Like it was this weird, to me, really weird hardware-based conversation that was a whole nother echelon of nerd, right? And my thing I'm really interested in right now is we accidentally are segueing right into a conversation that's really familiar if you've been around storage and never touched flash. These flash arrays are not these brand new, just fell off the back of the truck, barely work. Like, we've been working with customers building enterprise systems in large scale. Like, everybody's been doing this, so we're in this mode of like features, functionality, who can grow, who's scalable, who's like all this great feature and functionality that's just, face it, this is what is expected of a real storage system by a real customer today.
Yep.
And the thing I wanted to make sure everybody's getting on the same page about, because it's frankly beneficial to all four of us, is that everybody starts realizing, like, look, these things aren't just these toys for the top 0 tier anymore. They're definitely going well past that in different ways. We all could fight about features all day long, but they're going to this world of, like, look at all these capabilities I have that, heck, are really similar to what you've been used to, if not better, if not a new architecture can do it faster or more agile or something like that. So I wanted to push in that direction a bit of, for the whole all-flash world, if we're going there, realize that it is already in this new generation that's past just kind of like the really hardware bits and bytes, whose fab is better. And we're into whose features, who's integrated, who's certified.
Second generation is what I call them. The first gen was all the DRAM it started with, right?
pushing on that as like part of the subject.
And by the way, I wholeheartedly agree, Adam, totally. And I think it was interesting as we were talking beforehand. A couple of us have been through storage startups a couple of times. A couple of them, we did them together, Adam and I. It's funny, that there's a non-compressible time to mature a persistent stack, almost no matter how it's been created and what its sweet spot is and target use points. This second generation is out of that, phase of maturity. They're, I think we're all to the point now where these second generations are now deployed at thousands and thousands and thousands of customers if you add them up, and that's a good thing.
Quick transition too, for storage systems, we have network storage systems right here. The server options that float about, and it could be something designed to enhance, obviously kind of somewhat of a moot point perhaps here. Pernix data comes to mind as a caching means.
Totally.
We're starting to be able to cache writes and stuff. Data integrity is getting owned up the stream.
I think Pernix is pretty cool.
It's an interesting...
Too bad Satyam couldn't be here with us.
Oh, exactly. It would have been a fun conversation. But also, if you look at other products, other startups that come to mind, what's behind... We saw Nutanix and SimpliVity today.
Yep.
Essentially building network storage from internal devices, and then the general message of co-locating hot data as close to the processor as possible. Curious on thoughts from the panel on... Obviously, we're in the systems market here, and how things evolve there. That's.
So I did
Give Justin a shot.
I did a short talk track on this in a Minneapolis event that was supposed to be a flash forum, and it was flash vendors of all sorts. It was caching vendors, array side vendors, host-based vendors, and luckily I presented right in the middle, and I realized I had an opportunity to kind of not talk about Tintry and just talk about where to use flash and when to use it. And the genesis of it is, for the most part, it's really hard as a customer to quantify where exactly you need the performance in your stack, because you have to understand not only your data footprint, but the active set of data and where it's actually happening. My belief is always that flash applied at the right layer in the stack is beneficial as long as you know that. So I wouldn't say host-based flash is bad or it's good. It's more about what are you trying to achieve. That's relatively hard to understand, which is why I think for the most part people go back to applying it in their arrays because they've got arrays. It's there. Maybe
quantifiable problems.
Swap out a few drives, or add a flash shelf. But as Chad said, I think Pernix is an interesting solution. I also wonder what happens after the refresh cycle in the industry when every array has flash in it.
That's their sweet spot today are for customers that don't have flash in them, and that's people there, and they're helping people. So like, hey, kumbaya, right? I'll say it, here and now, a place, I don't know, Vaughn, maybe you and I agree, is that today the server, so think of this class in which you have the Nutanixes, the Scale.io, the vSANs, those architectural models which are server, COTS server plus persistence plus software equals
clustered file systems,
right? Clustered distributed file system. I call that a type 3.
There you go.
Chad nomenclature, right? They typically don't get quite as dense as purpose-built hardware appliances in terms of their footprints because of two factors. One, they're using commodity off-the-shelf components, and those generally are not as dense. So it's not unusual for a 2U server to have 5 or 10 or 12 spots for media. It's very easy and common to have in a 2U enclosure 25 things that you can put in there, right? So there's that, which translates into power cooling, et cetera, et cetera. The other thing is that intrinsically, those distributed file system methodologies use multiple copies of data distribution as their core protection mechanism, which means their utilization of that asset is a little bit lower than a purpose-targeted hardware appliance. Would you agree with all those
Vaughn, going back to January, I think this conversation...
He and I talked actually about it at VMworld last year, right? But I will say this for the record. In my opinion, those architectures, whether it's Scale.io, vSAN, style things, Nutanix, or whatever, those will increasingly be used for broader and broader workload sets, right? Again, I wouldn't be surprised if we started to see server vendors shift their server designs for these new storage architectures. We're seeing a little bit already in big Hadoop clusters. So we're seeing the server vendors build server architectures targeted at the big cold Hadoop use cases versus the hot Hadoop use cases. I wouldn't be surprised. And literally, the Scale.io thing is not, and for the vSAN thing is not a science project. It's not rare. There's a lot of customers doing Very cool. I think that will cannibalize more and more of the array, there is my storage thingamabob market.
Enterprise
So-
Unix
so
used to
it's-
work this way, right?
So I think it's a couple of just color comments to the 2 points that were made here. Flash in front of any form of disk media will accelerate it, right? It's caching constructs, whether it's in the host or in the array, is not a new construct. What you find, and you find as customers, because you go through these life cycles, is I buy an array, and on day 0, the team's pumped because it's fast, and as you near that latter half of the depreciation cycle, right, you're getting frustrated because your team's tweaking and tuning, and what happens is your data set size and the amount of hot active data is outgrowing, or the working set is outgrowing the cache, right? And this is just the design of the last decade plus within storage systems. Cache ratios relative to disk capacity continues to drive forward. So when I look at technologies like it's a host side cache or some bolt-on SSD tier within the array, and we've all been there with vendors, they will solve a problem today. This is an iterative step, right? This is a very tactical way to address your problem. This is where some of us get very pro on the all-flash side, because when you can change that paradigm, now I'm having to look at different business challenges. When I look at the market today, and I'll say take the 5 storage architectures, but maybe talk about it differently. And I've got a low-end SAN, high-end SAN, all-flash. I got some NAS for backup, some NAS for user data. I got some object store that's going to grow over time. Do I layer this with some software over it, and I put host side here and some direct storage here? I look at the data growth rates, and regardless of which source you want to pull from, 3 years from now, the world's going to have 3 times the amount of data it has. I don't see this fragmentation of technologies as the way to get there. I think we need to take a seismic jump forward. And I think tier 0 becomes something that's in memory. I think your tier 1 and 2 become blurred in their NAND. And I think your tape never goes away because it's a great archive media that you can power off. I think in broad terms, those are the formats that you should plan your designs around and make investments in storage technologies that are going to allow you to have the broadest use case. Whether they're host-based or array-based, the broadest use case is probably going to let your team scale.
I agree up to the point where you start thinking just throw more flash at it, and I say throw more storage intelligence at it, and let the appropriate data or data service or whatever you're trying to provide to that 3 times more data than we have now get hammered out by intelligent storage, not just brute force more flash, even if it's economical.
Well, I mean, look at this.
Because it will never be as economical as magnetic media for
certain use cases.
Certain use cases,
So
right?
Chad brought up Facebook, right? So we all expect that Facebook has to run on tight budgets. When you hit Facebook, and it's really easy to see in anyone's web browser, bring it up on your PC. Look through your friends' feed, and the recent stuff's great. Then go to Adam or Chad or Justin's page. By the way, you never accept my friend requests.
He doesn't get the hit.
Jump a month back and watch what happens.
No, I'm on his. I'm afraid we're good friends.
No, yeah.
We are. We really are.
Like take Facebook, just jump a month back and watch the page slowly build, and it'll also give you what's called highlights. It won't give you all the items. You got to click a button to see it all. That's between when you hit the flash tier, which is all data 7 days older or less, and the disk tier. And what they are saying, right, and they've communicated this, the volume of data that they have on big, slow drives, the big, slow drives are getting so slow at even the low access requirements, that's going all flash.
So just what's interesting is literally and Facebook is pretty cool because amongst all of the web scale players, they're one of the only ones that actually puts a fair amount of their architecture out there publicly for people to check out, right? So what's interesting is they were one of the first huge users of Memcached, which is a key value store, as a front end for a lot of their core database stacks. Flash is going to disrupt that too, where you're going to be able to have much larger Memcached footprints than you can fit in a physical server today. They're a huge customer of extremely large scale-out NAS from a leading scale-out NAS vendor. They use to store all sorts of stuff.
Is that the disk tier?
It's about 85 petabytes worth of stuff, right? And that is all on disk, by the way, today. And it's used for streaming content, which is not, it's just a bit of a sweet spot for those sorts of things, right? It's sequential.
That's good.
But where the bulk of their stuff is on today, the photos, when you scroll, is on something called Haystack, which is an object store that they developed themselves at uber large scale, sitting on on COTS hardware with an open compute hardware running with magnetic media. Now, I'm sure that they'd love for it to be faster, and trust me, there's a lot of smart people there. They are using all flash arrays. They're using scale-out NAS. They're using an object store they bake themselves. They're using Memcached as a in-memory persistence layer. Those workloads will proliferate. There will be a collapse, Fawn. There's no question of workloads that currently sit on magnetic media that shouldn't will go to flash. I don't. You'd have to be crazy to disagree with that. But I think that to expect that the architectures themselves will come down to like 3, I don't buy it.
So let me try to there's
In the 3 minutes we
45
have
seconds,
left, my friend.
according to that. let me say, because I heard in your question things that I feel like we could talk about for hours. Honestly, there was a bit of the server-side caching on flash, a bit of the software type like VSA software versions, vSAN. Help me out. There's a bunch of
Scale.io,
yeah,
Nutanix,
there's a bunch there. You asked
It's a
about those.
regurgitation of old enterprise
so-
Unix, by the way,
so,
which had internal disk with RAID and
So one of the things I'd like to say about that, because I think there's an important question there. You asked a really important question, and take this totally as Adam Carter throwing up his personal opinion. You can ask me about it later. The things, there's a bunch of overlap in there. I think you could choose some of them to build something that sits right on top of or is competitive with a different thing. But it looks to me in this world, honestly, like server-side caching stuff has a play. Cache is close to the app is better. But it's app-specific, super app-specific. So you better know how to wield that weapon. Software-based stuff, good stuff. Don't count it as free no matter what they tell you. You still got to build that thing. You still got to support it and maintain it. And that is harder than I think most people realize. But if you like to roll your own, cool stuff, right? I like the SimpliVity and Nutanix models. They've taken something and bundled up a feeling that, this is totally my belief, and I hope I don't offend them by saying this. I think they build some really cool solutions that are best fit for people that are so sick of IT they want it to be somebody else's problem. Yep. They don't view it as how I differentiate or compete my company.
The line today that I thought, if you don't realize you're using our technology, we've succeeded from the converged platform. I thought that was my
If you
takeaway.
need serious IT infrastructure that can do a lot of the things this new technology can do, but you don't know what the heck to do with it, you have no idea, that might be a decent solution for you, honestly. In my opinion, part of the reason why I'm on the products I'm on, and you look at some of these things here, I think when it comes to Flash, one of the easiest to adopt, most approachable, and broadly applicable ways to consume that in mass and solve all of these problems that were in that survey is just like it's always looked to you. This is a block device over the protocols you know, managed a lot like you know it with the features you know, but better. That seems really broadly applicable and really popular to customers.
You know what
so I think it's taking this huge chunk of that market.
It's easy to consume.
It's
Sure.
It's easier than the last stuff they did because not only is it look and feel the same, but it's just a new generation. We always get better.
Which is the one element I would push back on, like caching, which is if you look at caching for Oracle, you got to know the table space, the block size, the amount of cache you're going to put to it. If I'm going to look at VFRC in VMware, same thing. Which VM, how much space, what's its read-write pattern?
Got to know how to wield that weapon.
You don't know these things, and they're not dynamic.
Yeah,
You have the luxury, though, of doing that as a general purpose storage vendor. Just building what's familiar a little bit better.
The virtualization focus
When we
here?
take the belief that we did, which was the majority of workloads are virtualized, traditional storage is fundamentally broken in terms of storage constructs and virtual constructs, you need to basically start from scratch and do something different. It's a blessing and a curse, right? You get a blank slate, you get to build this awesome things that it does exactly what we say it does, right? We have customers that are fanatical about it. However, it's a little bit harder to say that thing you've been doing for the last 10 years, there's a better, different way to do it.
But elaborate on that intelligence a little more, and relative that it's virtualization, how would that stand in contrast to like the forthcoming vVols?
Well, so I think the simplest way to summarize that is vVols is
we were talking about it earlier.
huge rubber stamp saying, hey, Tintry, what you built? Yes, we need that. Actually, Chuck Hollis, before he left EMC, had a fantastic quote in one of his blogs. The fundamental unit of IT administration has become the virtual machine. Mm-hmm. I actually use that slide every day. And it's a Chuck Hollis quote. I think the difference as vVols is their end game. VM awareness was the beginning of Tintry. There's a whole lot more that we add on top of just being VM level and VM aware. So vVols could bring VM awareness to the whole industry, but we thought that wasn't the appropriate end game to build an entire company around. It's the beginning point.
And I got to just, for what it's worth, Well, this is a lot of fun, and I am looking forward to the next shot. The thing that is fascinating to me is this is a fun, passionate debate that plays out on Twitter, it plays out on stage. We're all competing for your business, which is a great thing for customers and for partners. Yay,
Choice.
all good. Choice.
Yep.
I will say that this is if you take a step back, while an important industry transition relative to the stuff that we started the day with, right? If this is the thing that you're obsessing about, I would say make some choices. Make some choices, move on, leverage technology, think about how do I abstract, automate, build APIs, how do I plug this into an infrastructure as a service layer and get on to the things that are going to drive a ton of additional value in the past act. Not that this isn't important. This is important, and the domain of storage is being radically disrupted by Flash, which is cool, but it's such a small part of the universe.
You're right from a perspective that usually infrastructure components are purchased ahead of the application software and the DevOps components. And this is where I go back to, and it's a soapbox statement. Buy something that's going to provide you, right, a very easy means to adopt, results that are measurable and off the charts, but has the broadest use case, so that when I do have my DevOps team changing their mind 6 months from now, they can move forward.
I don't disagree with that. I would just say, if you find yourself debating that topic forever, time to have some shots.
Yeah, let Eric
with that.
agreed.